Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite for Friday, December 23rd, as we embark on a pretty big holiday weekend. Great to have you with us this week. Violence rocks the city of Akron over the last 2 weeks. Why the big increase? We'll talk about it. FirstNight Akron approaches again. They still need a lot of volunteers. Is it still as big of a deal as it was before? And we get out the crystal ball and take a look at what will happen, we hope, in 2012. Those stories and more next on NewsNite. A lot to talk about this week, so let's get right to it. Great to have with us Steve Hoffman here this week from the Akron Beacon Journal. Great to welcome Stephanie Warsmith, also from the Akron Beacon Journal. And always great to see freelance contributor and journalist Jody Miller. And it is a big holiday weekend, so a lot of smiles and festive stuff. But the last few weeks in Akron, these murders, Jody, have just rocked the whole city. So many in such a short period of time.
Well, there was so many, it's like a quarter of the number of murders that have happened in Akron throughout the entire year. And these were 6 killings, 9 shootings, 6 killings in, I think, 5 days. And I think the police department and the city administration, they all went out of their way to make sure that the populace knew that it was not a gang-related type of thing, that this was more kind of it had to do with domestic squabbles, it had to do with families pitted against families, it had to do with some retribution and revenge types of things within a small segment of the Akron population. The sad thing is that, you know, it made national headlines, and unfortunately, you know, from my perspective, the problem that the police are having is that there is a measure of distrust, I think, from the black community to the police force. And so as a result, the police are finding it difficult in some respects to get to the bottoms of the killings and to find out who in fact has been mostly involved in these. And until that issue is addressed, I would hope that some of the black leaders in the community can bring to bear some of their influence to make sure that people understand this is the kind of thing that, number one, can't happen, and number two, the police have got to take care of.
Now, this, in a way, goes back to some of the concepts we've discussed on community policing, that the mayor and various community leaders have talked about breaking down this barrier, this idea that you don't snitch, you don't tell. And to me, one of the ways you attack that is to go back to some of these community policing concepts and try to build a better relationship, because we all like to think that there are a bunch of detectives ready to swarm into a neighborhood and solve every crime with, you know, DNA evidence or something like we see on TV. Well, that, you know, in reality, sadly, that's really not the way it works. I mean, the way it works is you develop sources, much like being a journalist, people you trust that give you information that you can go on. And that apparently that's not
it's not happening in this case, exactly.
We do have, though, you know, a considerable portion of the Akron Police Department is African American. You know, they are out in the community on a daily basis, so you wonder why there's still a disconnect in this city.
But there have been incidents in the past where the black community has come out against the police department, has felt that they were in fact being unfairly vilified for things that have happened. And I'm hoping that with a new police chief now, and with the PERF report and the concept of getting back to the community policing, like Steve has said, get the officers in the neighborhoods, let them build the relationships and develop a rapport with the people in the communities so that when an incident like this happens or incidents like this happen, they can in fact be used as source. They can go to the people they know and they can get the information they need to make sure this doesn't happen.
And Stephanie, you've covered the police department plenty. What kind of a toll does this take on the officers to have to deal with this many tragedies, notifications, all in a short period of time?
Well, I think it's difficult, and you know, this I think is always a tough time of the year. But I think it's also worth mentioning that their staffing is significantly down right now, and I think the city. Well, we know that the city is going to be trying to work to build that up some, but I think that strains them as well in trying to respond to, you know, this many serious incidents in such a short period of time.
When we talk about violence, you know, unfortunately we're usually talking about it after it's happened. This week at an Akron public school, Innis Middle School, a teacher found not only a threatening note taped to her door, but 2 bullets as well. And so that, you know, is a precursor. The same school, an unloaded gun was found with a child. Another child had the clip just 2 weeks earlier. We hear about guns in schools. Now we're seeing violence at this level in here. Some people are asking, what is going on in this town?
Well, and the sad thing is, to me, this is a middle school. I mean, we're talking about kids in what, fifth, sixth, and seventh grades. So these are kids who are 11, 12, and 13 years old in a lot of respects. How they would come upon bullets, first of all, is alarming to me. But unfortunately, there's an undercurrent in society today where people feel that if you need to, you can in fact take a situation in your own hands. If you are offended in some way, you harass a teacher in this way. If you feel like somebody's threatening you, you threaten them back. And unfortunately, to have it in the schools is just a really sad commentary.
And some of this is just basic firearm safety, and you would hope that people who obtain a weapon, you can go to a gun show and buy a weapon with no background check, no training whatsoever, and you have to be taught how to secure a weapon properly. You just don't leave weapons and bullets laying around the house. Unfortunately, it happens, and kids see it, and or adults, other adults, have access to a weapon. It should be, they should be locked up.
But it also goes back to the Sunday night gathering that Russ Neal, the councilman from, was it Ward 5? Ward 4. And one of the ministers of one of the black churches got together and tried to galvanize the black community in particular to make them understand that, that there's something that has to be done in the homes. Right. And the whole concept of it takes a village to raise a child has never been more prevalent than what we're going through right now. And I think it's time, and I hope it's an opportunity for some of the black leaders of this community to step up and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe there needs to be an endemic change here, so that we don't have people going around and killing each other because they're mad at each other, or it's a personal insult, or it's a domestic violence, or he did this to my sister, or that a child can go and get bullets and take them into school and literally tape them to a teacher's door and threaten a teacher.
We have had plenty of problems also with white.
Oh, I'm not, absolutely, yeah. I'm not denigrating the black community in any way.
About schools and bullets and guns, and this does happen in some of the bigger urban districts across the country, is it worth investing in metal detectors in our schools? Or does that send the wrong message? You hate to throw the baby out with the bathwater. What happens at one school shouldn't necessarily affect the whole district, but are we headed that direction with the economy beating down inner city families the way it is and violence on the increase? Do we reach a point where that becomes a consideration?
That would be a considerable expense, which also would, could be a challenge with the, budget issues that the district is facing.
And Steph's right. Who would pay for it? Would the schools have to pay for it? And what, you buy a metal detector instead of textbooks?
Keeps guns out of the schools. Is there a price somebody wouldn't be willing to pay for something like that?
I don't think we're quite there yet, but this is the kind of situation, unfortunately, where all it would take would be, probably one really bad incident happening in a school, and I'm sure there would be pressure. I mean, thank goodness that it hasn't happened yet. Short of that, it's sort of like community policing. I mean, there's a responsibility for educators anymore to be kind of more than educators. I mean, you have to have principals and teachers and guidance counselors keeping a very close eye on the situation in a preventive way and try to stop bad behavior from happening before it escalates. I'm not arguing in any way that that's an easy thing to do. All of us have had, or will have teenagers at some point, and they're an unpredictable lot.
Well, and there's also, I think there are some programs in the schools that help to teach children and students that there are ways to resolve disputes. There are some programs that help to address that kind of thing, and I think maybe that's one of the ways that you could go ahead doing this, is to expand on that and show them that there are other options. There are other ways to deal with problems or situations that develop.
Right, it's too bad, you get to the point where you're buying metal detectors instead of computers, where you're having classes on how to avert violence rather than, algebra, right. There's only so many hours in the day.
I think most people would rather see the money go to teachers than security, But in this day and age, we've got to have security. I have teenagers. They go off to school. Last thing I want them to see when they start a school day is a metal detector and have to stand in line. But you wonder about the safety. And we should say that, certainly guns have been found in the suburban districts as well. It's not unique to the inner city districts at all. And how do you pay for it? Yeah. I mean, we can certainly come up with more questions than we can ever solve in this format. We'll talk about these topics in future editions as well here on NewsNight.
For more NewsNight content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at newsnight.net.
Next weekend, an annual tradition continues here in the Akron area. FirstNight Akron launches again on New Year's Eve, a family-friendly event that launches the whole city of Akron into a downtown celebration. I remember the first one was very exciting. Now we're into the teens, the number of years that we've had it. Everybody I know that goes has a good time, but I don't know that many people that go anymore. Is it still worth the investment the city puts into it?
Oh, I think it is, definitely. Because the people who do go, as you just said, they have a ball. They really do. And it's a wonderful opportunity for people, especially people with children, to come downtown, have a family-friendly type of thing. There are games, there are exhibits, there are crafts you can do. You've got the fireworks show, and it's geared toward both, I think, a 9 o'clock fireworks show so the little ones can go home to bed, and then a midnight show. So it really is a wonderful time, especially if the weather cooperates, which it appears that it's going to do this year.
Every year it's always a crapshoot.
It really is. But it's still a fun event. And yet I haven't seen as much publicity about it this year, and maybe that's why the volunteer numbers are down. But they do need some volunteers.
How do you get people to volunteer, though? New Year's Eve is, a lot of people want to do something for themselves.
This is something you can do for the community, and it really is a friendly kind of an event. Everybody's happy, everybody's having a good time. So, if you've got no plans, why not volunteer? Because you get free access to some of the events, all of the events, if in fact you volunteer. So, why not? Give back.
Yeah. You going to volunteer, Jen?
I'm not. I do have things to do. Are you bringing Sarah?
No, we're pretty boring on New Year's Eve. We usually, stay home and watch whatever DVDs we've gotten that Christmas. That's our
we used to go when our kids were little, and it's nice option when you have a family with young children. It's something you can all do together. But I must admit that since we're empty nesters, it kind of loses its appeal.
Well, the people that go do have a great time.
They do.
But they're in search of volunteers. If you want to volunteer, look online, go to ohio.com. I'm sure they can send you over to see what's going on with FirstNight. But after the first of the year, we return to normalcy. We return to city council, Stephanie. Will we recognize anybody that's there without a score sheet?
It's another big turnover on council. You've got 4 people who are leaving, Kelly Crawford, Tina Merletti, Bob Otterman, who's ending 41 years of public service in many different capacities, and then Phil Montgomery, who's running for Summit County Council in next year's election. And then you have 4 new members coming on, Gary Moneypenny, who's really a veteran returning, and then 2 totally new people, Donnie Kamer and Bob Hoke. And then you have Marilyn Keith, who is new, but her name sounds familiar for a reason, because her husband, Bob Keith, who's now the council clerk, held that seat before her. So you've got really a pretty big shift there, and we've talked some about, is this going to mean a shift in the dynamics on council? Are they going to have enough members who will vote together as a block and really shake things up? I did hear that Mike Williams had all the new council members over to his house, and they kind of had a powwow there and talked about what's coming up, and so I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that's going to shake out.
So are they politicking for the new kids?
They may be. He said that in his speech after he lost the mayoral race. He said, look, I lost, but there's a big shakeup on council, and these are people who may be wanting to see change in the city. And so he was already talking about that, right from the get-go.
I think the people to watch, at least initially, are Donnie Kamer and Bob Hoke. Yeah. And in the sense that the mayor is usually able to cobble together a coalition. Sometimes are easier than others, but there has been, in my view, a fair degree of stability on the council in terms of policy. You know, we haven't had huge shifts in direction. I think both Hoke and Kamer are obviously they're new. I mean, they're really new.
Yes.
Never held elective office
Right.
before. So not only is there the you know, kind of this, are they going to be anti-administration? You know, how are they going to side? Are they going to side with Williams? There's also a learning curve, and you know, we like to think that people get elected to office and they've got a game plan and they go in and everything, you know, they're ready to go. Well, you know, it's just not like that. I mean, you really gotta, I mean, to be crude, I mean, you gotta find the bathroom, and then you gotta kind of go from there. I mean, you have to understand the rules of how the place works.
The bathroom has actually been a topic of city council news.
Don't pass cash. Don't accept cash when you're in the men's room.
But while Marilyn Keith is being added to council, Jody, two strong female voices, Tina Merletti and Kelly Crawford, are leaving council.
Absolutely. And it's really sad because Kelly Crawford is leaving because she got a job in the corporate world and just was not going to have the kind of time that she wanted to have to devote to a council seat. And Tina Merletti was surprisingly, I think, to a lot of political pundits, she was beaten in a race. She has promised that she would stay involved. And don't forget, you still have Linda Amobian, who is council at large, and who has a very well-respected and, if it has to be, very loud voice. And she will use it. And then Marilyn Keith, I think, having been, it's not like, you know, because you are married to a former councilman that, through osmosis you understand it. But it's a partnership in a lot of respects when you are the spouse of a council person. So she's been around, she understands what's going to happen. So I would look forward to both of those women stepping up and playing an active role, I think, on council.
She was an active partner.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, and she also
with the Block Watch group and everything like
Right,
that.
right.
Yes.
Which
gonna
year
say-
are you talking about?
She, as in Marilyn Keith.
Marilyn Keith.
Absolutely.
So our viewers can keep
Absolutely.
score at home. Go ahead.
And the only other thing too is don't forget that at this week's council swearing in ceremony, Marco Somerville was once again voted in as president of council. So that's a stability factor because he has been president for as long as I can remember.
You just hate, you know, I mean, I would hate to see the debate devolve back to some of these topics that we've seen before, you know, one of them being that the downtown has been developed at the expense of the neighborhoods, stuff like that. It was just absolutely not true. I mean, it's been documented. But those are the kind of old fights, you know, you just don't want to see happen again.
Well, especially in what is promising to be another challenging year for the city in terms of its finances with the cuts coming to the local government fund and the city having to take on paying for the firefighters because of that grant running out in July. So it's going to be a challenging year. So,
Absolutely.
you know, the council in a lot of ways is going to have to come together quickly here to, address some very serious issues.
Okay. We will talk about this in the new year with the new council right here on NewsNight.
On NewsNight.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNight.net.
2012 is almost upon us, and this is our last regular panel for 2011. Next Friday right here, we'll see, is it pubs and guns, Jody, or guns and pubs?
Guns and pubs.
Guns and pubs. Don't take guns into pubs, but the laws have changed. We look at that for the whole half hour.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
we want you to see that. But as we look ahead to 2012, which some people think will be the end of the world, we have to look at it as though it will not end. So let's throw on our, crystal balls here. Let me throw a few things at you guys. Tell me what you think. What do you think is going to happen with the presidential race?
Well, we finally have a primary. We've agreed on a primary,
That's a big relief.
which is
$15 million savings.
$15 million savings, and the primary will be in March, which is interesting because Ohio is always worried about its clout. Ohio moved its presidential primary from May to March to gain clout, oftentimes didn't do so. But now it looks like with this crazy Republican primary that actually, if this battle goes on and we keep switching front runners, Ohio might actually matter this time in a primary. It always matters in the general. We're always a battleground state. We will be a battleground state again. We're very closely divided, despite our governor's attitude that, of course, the Republicans have swept everything in sight.
So who wins the GOP nomination, and then who wins in November?
In Ohio? I think, personally, I think the whole flirtation with Gingrich is rapidly fading. I think Ohio's Republican Party has traditionally been a party of business, so I believe that would play to Romney's advantage. I think Romney would have some rapport with the big donors and the business community. That said, the Tea Party here as elsewhere is a real wild card. So you don't know how strong.
What do you guys see happening in November?
You know what? A lot of it depends on how the economy develops over the next couple of months. I mean, there have been signs that the economy is recovering and that things are getting better. Unemployment is going down. So I think if the economy continues to recover and if jobs continue to be created, unless the Republican Party comes up with an extraordinarily ambitious plan for the economy, I think that Obama may in fact get a second term.
Steph?
Well, I know I've been watching it. It's very early, but I've been watching the polls to see how the many different Republican presidential candidates are faring so far against Obama, and they do show him, leading in most cases. So, but I agree with Jody. I think a lot of that depends on what is happening when that election rolls around, and there's a great deal of time between now and then.
Okay, 2012, 2011 was sure fun for John Kasich. What happens to our governor in 2012?
Well, first of all, I hope he doesn't call a police officer stupid. You know what? He's got a very ambitious agenda. That when he tried to recap his first year in office, he talked about more jobs. I hope that he is able to create more jobs in Ohio. I hope he is able to be a little less aggressive in terms of what he wants. I hope he doesn't overreach the way he did this last year. And that includes not just the governor, but obviously I think the Republican Party. I think there are a lot of things that can be done in the state as long as there's some leadership, some bipartisan cooperation. And one of the things I would like to see him do, as he would like to do, I think, is be an education governor.
That's what you'd like to see him do.
What do I think he's going to do?
Yeah, well,
I think he may implode again.
Steve?
Well, this is a guy, for all his talk about the Republican landslide, and the Republicans are in charge, they are in charge. They control everything in sight in Columbus, with the possible exception of the Supreme Court, which has like one Democrat on it. But this is a guy that won with 49% of the vote. Now, that's not a mandate. But he does have very powerful majorities in both the House and the Senate. After the redistricting process that we went through, they will remain in Republican hands for the foreseeable future. We've had terrible gerrymandering, in my opinion, this time around. We've gone way beyond what I regarded in the 90s as a moderate Republican redrafting of districts, which showed some restraint. Now all bets are off. So, but that said, even with those strong majorities, you can't, as Jody's alluding to, you can't keep passing ridiculous abortion bills. You can't keep cutting. And on this jobs front, I think the governor, he makes a good case, but you look at the actual number of jobs he's creating.
Yeah.
They're
not that many.
They're not that many. Plus, you got to remember, this is a guy that campaigned on, oh my God, you got to elect me. We've lost 400,000 jobs. Now, where are the 400,000? I'll start listening to John Kasich when he comes up with 400,000 jobs.
2012, Steph, what do we see for the city and the county?
Well, the county is going to have, several interesting races coming up. The sheriff was going to have some really interesting people running, and now we're down to fewer. But, all people who really are not well known. So I think that'll be a good one to watch. County Council has some interesting, matchups there.
Pete Crossland's coming back.
Pete Crosland, yes.
Wants to come back.
Yes,
Wants to come
yes.
back.
Yeah.
What's old is new again.
Right. And then on the city side, obviously, they won't be on the ballot, but yet at the same time, the mayor's coming into another new term after a difficult election year. And then, as we already talked about, facing continuing budget problems and the safety issues. So I think it's going to be another tough year.
Fracking a big deal in 2012?
Oh, yes. fracking is going to be a real big deal in 2012, not only because of the potential job opportunities that it's going to bring and the potential wealth in terms of the leases that some of these companies are providing to landowners, but because of the kinds of regulations that maybe need to go into place. And I was gratified, I think it was this week, that the Ohio EPA came out and said that they are going to regulate it a little bit more. This is an unknown in a lot of respects in terms of what happens to water supplies and what happens to water tables when you put those kind of chemicals down into the ground. And it's also what happens when the residual comes out, and what do you do with that? So I think it's fracking and oil and gas drilling with the Marcellus and the Utica Shale in the state of Ohio has a tremendous economic potential, but it's got to be balanced and weighed with the environmental concerns.
And we got to say that, you know, in terms of the way this system is set up now, the balance is between the industry and the state, basically the ODNR, with also the Ohio EPA is interested in other aspects of drilling, how you dispose of the fluid, that sort of thing. There is no local control here whatsoever,
and there's frustration about that.
Extreme frustration with that. I don't know if anything will happen to that. You know, the last bill that the Republicans passed on this was House Bill 165, I believe. And we're starting to get the regulatory process rolling on drilling and then eventually fracking.
And it'll be a topic we do talk about a lot in 2012. Certainly a lot of people are making a lot of money at it as well who say that it's a good thing. But, you know, last question, are you and Ed going to play nice in 2012?
Never.
Never.
Oh, well, yeah, really. I mean, it's just, he's so smart, and he just drives me nuts sometimes because he thinks so fast. And I think of everything that I want to say after the camera stops.
That alone is why you should tune into NewsNight every Friday. Jody, Stephanie, Steve, thank you so much. Have a great holiday, everybody. Guns and Pubs next Friday. See you in the new year on NewsNight.